If you visualize a person with bubbles above their head, word bubbles, there are conversations going on all around us. So now I want to point out the obstacles, because there are obstacles to overcome as we listen. If you look at the amount of time spent on the course of a day, it's interesting what the research says, particularly for business people. 45% of our time is spent listening, 30% is spent speaking, 16% reading, 9% writing. Let me give you some other data here. So the average person speaks 125 to 175 words a minute. Average person consumes 400 to 800 words a minute. So if you think about that, there's quite a gap. And what happens in the gap between 175 and 400 or 175 and 800 is we have some spare time. We daydream. So people are going back to their voicemails, to their emails, the thing they have to get to. They're present, they're drifting in and they're drifting out. Holding someone's attention is very different, just how our brains are structured, right? Going through that to-do list, right, when we ought to be paying attention to somebody. Let's look at another angle. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. That's 2,500 thoughts an hour. That's 42 thoughts a minute. So if a person's having 42 thoughts a minute, you're speaking 150 to 175 words a minute, they can take in 400 to 800, and they have random thoughts showing up. The ability to get a message across or assume someone's heard me is an art in and of itself. So it's important to meet people where they're at. You know, everything is viewed through the lens of a context. If I seek to understand where a person is and I'm the one communicating, well, perhaps I have a bit of an advantage. I try to understand where the person is, what their role is in life, why we're engaged. I also want to equip them as what I'm trying to bring forward. I try to do what I can to work around the obstacles. So people look at things through the lens of a context, right? Where they are in their life. What's also interesting is people have what I call this occurring world, our interpretations and our perceptions. So based on what the message is coming across to me or me to another, we're going to respond to it simply based on how it occurs to us. And how it occurs to us is based on our context and where we are at that moment in time in life. Whatever that occurrence is going to trigger an action because it's going to generate emotion. So if you look at what the context is, how it occurs to me or to the person, it generates an action and you get a result. So if I'm not getting a result in communication that I want to get, if the person has not heard me, perhaps I've not been present to the context, right? How is this landing for them? Am I speaking to them, meeting them where they're at? What actions could I take to help it land? Right? So therefore, if I look at it overall and if I think about it, if I was to offer one thing, I'd say context is a decisive factor in how we listen. Also, look at it this way. I tend to think of this anytime I come across a group of people or even a one person. If in fact we have 50 or 60,000 thoughts a day, right? We'll use the 60,000 number, right? 2,500 thoughts an hour, 41 thoughts a minute. We're constantly in conversations with ourselves. If you visualize a person with bubbles above their head, word bubbles, there are conversations going on all around us. If you enter into a room with a number of people, think of the amount of bubbles going on around people's head and the conversations that are going on. You may be leading a meeting, leading a group of people, or even in a one-on-one situation where you're the only voice speaking. But it's important to be aware of there are hundreds of conversations going on. So let me share, or perhaps remind you, about some simple yet what I would believe powerful fundamentals to fortify listening skills. This is what I would call also part of Mastery Mountain. It is one of those mountains with no top. But if you master or get close to master listening, life will change for you in amazing ways.